Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Paul Harris and I am president of the City Club's Board of Directors. I am pleased to introduce today's speaker, Larry Cuban, Professor Emeritus of Education at Stanford University. Professor Cuban comes to the City Club with diverse experiences in and strong ideas about education. Trained as a historian, he received his Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Pittsburgh and his master's from Case Western Reserve University. Before becoming a professor, he served as a high school teacher of social studies and directed a teacher education program that prepared returning Peace Corps volunteers to teach in inner-city schools. He then completed his doctoral work at Stanford University and thereafter assumed the position of superintendent of the Arlington, Virginia Public Schools, a position he held until he returned to Stanford in 1981. Between 1981 and 2001, Professor Cuban taught 3 times in local high school semester-long courses in U.S. history and economics. As a Stanford School of Education professor during that 20-year period, Professor Cuban was selected 7 times by students for an Excellence in Teaching award. His major research interests focus on the history of curriculum and instruction, educational leadership, school reform, and the uses of technology in the classroom. He has authored or co-authored a number of books on those subjects. A few quotes from Professor Cuban on the general subject of school reform and classroom practice will give you some sense of the distinguished educator from whom you are about to hear. The first I convey solely from a human interest standpoint. On the subject of the benefits to researchers of shadowing students as they go from class to class during the school day, Professor Cuban noted one recent experience where a student commented on, quote, the awkwardness of an old white man walking with me. I really like that one. On the subject of the sometimes assumed link between improving urban public schools and reviving an alien economy, Professor Cuban has commented, quote, how long will it take before we assume no longer that public schools are boot camps for the economy, but rather places for growing a democratic society? And finally, on the subject of the Internet, he has commented, quote, the influence of the Internet on students' thinking and reading outside and inside schools is seldom made a part of public discussion of high-tech devices. I am pleased to present, on behalf of the City Club of Cleveland, Larry Cuban, Professor Emeritus of Education at Stanford University.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's a distinct pleasure to be here. I taught for 7 years at Glenville High School, and I never thought that I would be speaking at the City Club, so I appreciate it very much. I start with a warning. Some speakers aim for the heart and inspire you. Other speakers aim for the funny bone and make you laugh. And even other speakers offer practical advice and that listeners can use the very next day. Some speakers even aim for the head to get you to think about important issues in different ways. I am not an inspirational speaker. I do not tell jokes, and I have no advice for anyone to use next week. Now, I may have your attention, but at the risk of thoroughly annoying you by offering no inspiration, laughter, or practical advice. What I will try to do is to get you to think more deeply about an issue of school reform called small high schools. I begin with a quote. America's high schools are obsolete. I am terrified for our workforce, end quote. That's Bill Gates, then Microsoft chairman, talking to governors and business leaders who assembled in 2005 to create an agenda for improving high schools. At the National Education Summit, high schools were cast as the core education problem facing the country, or in their words, the front line in the battle for America's future economic prosperity, end quote. Bill Gates said nothing new to his audience. For decades, political and business leaders have pointed to U.S. slippage in international rankings of high school and college graduation rates. Listen to IBM's chairman in 1991, 14 years earlier. I'm quoting, Education isn't just a social concern, it's a major economic issue. If our students can't compete today, how will our companies compete tomorrow? In an age when a knowledgeable workforce is a nation's most important resource, American students rank last internationally in calculus and next to last in algebra. Now, if you really want to go back in time, listen to the president of the National Association of Manufacturers. I'm quoting, "There is hardly any work we can do or any expenditures we can make that will yield so large a return to our industries as would come from the establishment of educational institutions which would give us skilled hands and trained minds for the conduct of our commerce." Now, those words were said in 1898. Strong linkages between schooling and the health of the economy have been forged by business leaders for well over a century. Nothing new in what Bill Gates said in 2005. As the U.S. economy has burned and churned in the past few decades, as jobs have been and are outsourced to countries where labor is cheaper, the pressure to increase the academic rigor and the graduation rate of U.S. high schools has intensified. Having peaked at close to 80% in 1969, the overall U.S. high school graduation rate has dropped over the past decade and is now closer to 70%. This means that only 7 out of 10 students who start high school finish. Of the 7 who do graduate, 4 continue their education, and 2 finish college in time. For students who are Black, Hispanic, or poor, the statistics are much worse. Only half of Black and Hispanic students finish high school, and most of those are not eligible for college admission. For youth who are not college-bound, the options are dismal. Often only dumbed-down, dead-end jobs remain, even for those with a high school diploma. One response to this grim situation is to create small, rigorous high schools. The idea is that small high schools, those with fewer than 400 students, or 100 to each grade, provide a more personalized and safer environment than the much larger 1,500 to 4,000 student high schools in most big cities. Small high school reformers believe in their heart of hearts that these schools will encourage more students to graduate ready for college. And they say increasing the academic rigor of coursework will lower the number of graduates who enroll in college remedial courses. Beyond the depressing statistics, the physical and social conditions of many large urban high schools are dreadful. They are often overcrowded, understaffed, and sometimes dangerous places for both students and teachers. Not so 50 years ago, when President James Conant, Harvard President James Conant, saw small high schools as the enemy of a good education because they lacked the choices and opportunities for students. Today, these very same comprehensive large high schools, especially in cities, have become the enemy. The push for small and rigorous high schools specifically targets big city schools. Many well-off suburbs have large high schools and send most of their students to college. Shaker Heights High School, for example, graduates virtually all of its 1,700 students, and over 85% go on to college. Westlake High School, with 1,400 students, graduates 99%, and the vast majority go on to college. Even in the big cities, very large high schools are also quite successful. Stuyvesant High School in New York City is huge. Out of a student body of 3,200, 99% graduate and nearly all attend college. At the other extreme, many small rural high schools struggle to attract enough well-trained teachers to provide a range of academic classes.